This episode is part of Glendale Library Arts and Cultures and the Southern California Library Cooperative's Be the Change series, which focuses on inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism.
Be the Change events will build a collective understanding of systemic racism, elevate the voices and stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and inspire our community to be the change.
Hi everyone, it's Melissa.
And Desiree.
Welcome to another episode of G.E.N Talks, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect youth to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions.
Today's special guest is Vero, who is the host of Modern Immigrant. She is originally from Caracas, Venezuela. Growing up, she was fascinated with her father's journey as he shared his stories about his immigration. Today, her experience with immigration continues as she explores life in the USA. She created Modern Immigrant with the idea of opening a space to talk about immigration and to support each other. She believes that this is what has helped her the most through the immigration journey, which has been listening to other people's stories, which gives her hope and strength to continue hers.
But before we get started, don't forget to follow us on our socials on Facebook and Instagram at MyGlendaleLAC. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Glendale Library Arts and Culture, where we post the full episodes every Friday at 4:30 p.m. So thank you, Vero, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So to start off the interview, how did the Modern Immigrant podcast begin and the inspiration behind it?
Okay, so the Modern Immigrant podcast began in 2019. So before COVID, I actually started to think about this idea to have conversation with immigrants. And I think the main inspiration was my dad. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. I grew up in Venezuela and my dad migrated from Croatia. And I grew up hearing the challenges that he went through. So when I ended up being an immigrant myself later on in life, when I moved to the US, I realized that immigration was really tough and difficult. And sometimes we don't talk about it that often. Every time I will get together with my friends that were also immigrants, we will feel some sort of like relief when we were talking about the challenges we were all facing. And we were like, wow, I'm not the only one that feels like that. So that really kind of clicked, realizing that we needed to open more spaces where we can talk about immigration. And so I love podcasts and I love listening to podcasts, and I say, hey, why not creating that? And it really started in my house, in the kitchen of my house, just recording with friends. And then I moved to, starting to open an Instagram account and a website and reaching out to people that I admire. And that's a little bit on a nutshell what has been.
So I think you touched upon this a little bit, but prior to your podcast, did you feel like that safe space where you were able to find support?
It was challenging. I would say no. I would say I was finding support within my family and friends. Like I would text them, I would call them. I would definitely talk to my mom back home pretty often, but I wasn't finding that in the States. Like I arrived to Seattle and I was feeling pretty lonely. Like when I needed to reach to, go to a doctor, find a therapist, apply for services, I started to realize that because my status as an immigrant, I didn't have access to many things, right? So I didn't find a place where I could go and feel safe, as you were saying, and feel heard. I kept using resources and people that were back home still, which I think it makes experience of immigration way harder when you don't find that in your current country.
And in your bio, you mentioned how your experience with immigration continues to grow as you explore life in the USA. So what has that experience taught you?
The immigration experience, wow. I think being an immigrant, I say it, I think in the podcast kind of bio, which is that it has definitely been one of the most challenging experiences in my life. So as any challenging experience, it shapes you, right? It makes you grow and it makes you learn tons of things. In my case, I have seen how resilient I can be, how strong, even when I don't feel strong, even when I feel sad, even when I feel like I want to give up, I have that resilience within me of continue to go. So I think that's something I wouldn't have found out if I would have stayed back in Venezuela in my comfort zone. I think it's something that we can all learn when we really get out and try something new.
What does the process look like when you're preparing for an episode?
Yeah, so I'm trying to get it more organized, but it looks something like I reach out to the person I want to interview, or I follow up with someone that applies through our website that wanted to share their story. The first thing I do is try to find a date and a time that works, since I interview people that are kind of like all over the world. Once we have that settled, I create a little outline of questions that I would like to ask them. So they usually tell me something really meaningful about their experience that they want to share. And then I create some questions that are really flexible. I want to have like a conversation that's very informal, but where we'd also touch on those important things. So I create that outline, give it to the guest, and then we record. After the recording, there's tons of steps on editing. I record an intro. I first started doing only audio, and then I moved to having also YouTube. So now I include that video piece, and then there's the images and the content that I write to promote the episode afterwards.
And what has this podcast journey taught you?
Oh, okay. You have taught me those are great questions. They make me reflect. And I think it taught me that, you can really create spaces that you need, right? Like, I feel like it's been a difficult journey creating a podcast and creating this space and staying consistent, because I also have a job. I'm about to start my master's program. Like, I have other things in my life. And this is a project, it's a passion, but it's needed, right? So I think it's been really difficult to continue to do it when you have other stuff going on in your life, but that's what it has taught me, right? There has to be some sort of passion and consistency when you need to create something that it's going to help you and others. So it's not going to be easy. It definitely taught me that. It's not going to be big right away. It's not going to necessarily give you or meet the expectations that you have, but that does not mean that you have to give up or that you have to stop doing it, right? So it's that, being patient, being consistent, and keep thinking about, why am I doing it? I always go back to that.
Is there something that you wish you would have known prior to starting your own podcast?
Yes, I as I said before, like, I wish somebody would have said to me, hey, it's gonna be difficult. You're gonna encounter a lot of things that you don't know how to do. In terms of like easy things like tools, and also bigger things like, how can I monetize it? Is this gonna, like, how many people are gonna listen to the podcast, right? Like, I didn't have any information about what was being, you're doing good and you're not doing good. I felt like I didn't have any guidance. I just did it. And then I was like, oh, is this good? Is it not? Like, I'm not hearing feedback immediately. So I wish somebody would have said to me, it's going to be okay. Keep doing it. You need to, create a base. You need to network. You need to send emails. You need to tell people to listen to it. And those were things that I started to figure it out along the way. Like, oh, I need to promote it. I need to sell what I'm creating. And that way people are going to give it the value that it also has. But it needed to start with me giving it that value.
And I think you already kind of touched upon this, but like, how do you find your guests, and how do you ensure that they feel comfortable so that they could be vulnerable and share their experiences with you?
Yeah, I think a big part of how I find my guests is using Instagram. So I'm pretty active on Instagram, and I follow different accounts and people that are doing work with immigrants, and that also inspire me. So that's one great way, right? Reaching out to people that you admire, that have support you within your own journey. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Another way I realized that it's opening the space for people to participate. So I really ask people to send me DMs, send me an email, and I think that goes with the piece of feeling safe, right? Like, I want people to know that Modern Immigrant is a space for everyone, right? For immigrants that have an Instagram account or not, that have been working with immigration or not, it's a space where everyone can feel safe. And I think when I start talking to them, like when I make that first connection in that first email, I think it's the way you approach them, right? Like if you approach them with openness, with kindness, letting them know what's the reason of your podcast, what's the reason for you connecting, right? Like you don't want to make it just like, hey, I want to interview you, period. I think that's where the relationship starts, of feeling safe. It's from that first email, from that first direct message. And then when we are in the interview, I'm always really open about, hey, we don't have to go into an area if you don't want to. And that's why I think the outline is so important. I have had people reach out to me back and say, hey, I would like I don't want to talk about my current immigration status. So I remove that question, right? So they know what they're getting into, similar to the questions that you guys show me. I think that helps, you feel safe. And I also let them know that they can always tell me if they want me to edit some parts, which has happened a ton of times, because you start talking and you feel safe and you feel vulnerable. And then you think about it, you say, wait, I didn't want to share that. Maybe that was too much. And that's totally okay. So I think being able to tell them that's fine, that's your right, I'm going to remove it. It's really important, because for me, I want them to feel safe. I don't want to put like a story that's really, controversial and raw just for the sake of the listens and the plays.
So Modern Immigrant also has a book club. Why did you decide to also incorporate having a book club for the podcast?
Yeah, so this is, it was actually one of the listeners' idea. She reached out to me and said that she has been listening to the podcast. And we were going through, we were talking about a situation that was taking place in the US about police brutality. So I was using my page to touch on that and the perspective of an immigrant that, didn't know about these issues, because those were issues that are completely different in your country. So I said, hey, I really want to learn more about this. So I'm going to start reading the book, So You Want to Talk About Race, which is a great book, by the way. And some people, like my listener, that one listener, and other people started saying, why don't we all read it? Like, I also want to read it. And they were also immigrants. They were like, I also want to know what's going on with this. What's the issue with race in the US and how is it different from our countries? And so we started talking on on direct messages and talking about it. And I wanted to share more about the book, but I realized that it wasn't necessarily related to the podcast and the episode. So I say, hey, why don't we create a space where we read books to learn and to support our immigration journey? Because I think I never thought about that. I never thought about how much books had really been a safe place for me during my immigration, and a place where you can learn and understand another culture. So that's when I started more formally the book club, and I opened a different account, and that's where we kind of share things that we're reading and they're helping our journey.
So from your first episode, which was with one of your best friends, to now your most recent episode, which talked about finding a job as an undocumented immigrant in the US, how have you seen your podcast change and grow?
Well, at the beginning, I don't know what I was doing. I don't even want to hear that first episode again. I loved it. It's my best friend. We met again in the US thanks to our immigration journey. So it was great. It was beautiful. But I think I was really in the way I think I didn't know the tone that I wanted to create with the episodes. I think I was joking a little more. It was also my one of my best friends, right? So it had a different tone. And I think, I still like it, and I still think it was really beautiful in a way. But I think when I look at now, which is, I think it's 92 episodes, I see myself more confident. I see myself, it's still me. I don't try to pretend to be someone I'm not. I still keep that, friendship kind of tone, but I'm also more prepared on where do I want to go with the interview. And I think that's something that wasn't there at the beginning. It was more, let's talk and let's see what happens. And I think it's pretty much because now I prepare, right? I'm going to talk to someone I don't know. So I want to know, where do we want to go? His main, in the case of the last episode with Maya, his purpose is to help immigrants find jobs. So that really helps me, to stay focused on what I want. So I think that has been a huge progress over time.
For anyone who wants to start their own podcast, what are some tips that you would give them?
Well, I think the first one, when I was saying the challenges, you don't know that it's going to be difficult. I think the first tip I can say is, if you want to create a podcast, I would recommend having a passion behind it. Like, it's going to be difficult. You're going to want to, give up. Some episodes are not going to do as well as others. So you really need to stay focused on why do you want to do it, right? If I didn't have a passion with immigration, I wouldn't be working on an episode on a Sunday at 11 p.m., right? Like, why would I be doing that? Like, sometimes I ask that to myself, like, really? I wouldn't be booking interviews in the weekend. I wouldn't be, right? Like, so I would say, yeah, think really, why do you want to do it? What that passion is leading you? Is it going to help someone? If it's going to create an important space that you feel it's needed? And I think that's going to be like something that's going to keep you going. In terms of like more technical stuff, I would say listen to other podcasts, like consume a lot of different podcasts, reach out to people that have a podcast already. That's something I didn't do, and ask them for an advice. Like I even created an episode in Spanish with some tips. So if anyone speaks Spanish, they can check it out. And so, yeah, I just think connecting with others is always a good starting point.
And where would you like to see Modern Immigrant podcasts going in the future?
I think I want to see it growing. Definitely more people discovering the podcast, having more diverse stories, episodes from different countries, from different backgrounds. I know there's still a lot of things that we haven't touched. So I want to make sure that I create that space for those topics. I'm excited about creating more things similar to the book club. I also have a project called Immigration is Good. So I want to grow Modern Immigrant as a space where people can find support, can find resources, and can feel that immigration can look differently too from what we keep seeing in the news necessarily.
Has the podcast helped you learn more about yourself? If so, what has it taught you?
Yeah, I think it has definitely taught me that I can be really stubborn sometimes. So I think it has taught me to be a little more flexible in those. I think I was talking about expectations versus reality. Mm-hmm. So it really had taught me to be more flexible, more open, more kind. It taught me that I had an idea of what immigration was when I started, and is teaching me that there's so much out there that I didn't know and that I don't know. And I think just being open to that, being open to understand that there's going to be different journeys and that they're all okay. I think that's just huge, that flexibility in all senses.
And to you, what does it mean to be Latina and be able to share other people's story?
For me to be Latina, that's a question I ask in my podcast, and I always think that it's a difficult one. I'm really proud to be Latina, and I always say that I discovered that I was Latina when I moved to the US. Before that, I was Venezuelan, right? Like I only had that one identity. And moving to the US, discovering the community within the Latinos taught me that I am so much more than a person from one country, right? I'm able to connect. For me, being Latina is community and it's connection, and it's having a best friend from Argentina, another great friend from Mexico, another friend from Spain, and understanding that the fact that we all speak Spanish makes us really close and makes us connect, but we can all share our cultures, we can all share the food that we enjoy, the traditions that we have. So really discovering that I wasn't alone as a Venezuelan in Seattle, but I was a Latina in a whole community has been like an amazing finding.
Before we end, we have some rapid fire questions. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Blue.
Could you describe yourself as a teenager in 3 words?
Intense, stubborn, I think I continue to have that, and creative.
If you could have any superpower, what superpower would you have?
I think I would really like to read people's minds, which is, I think it's a little scary, but I would like that.
If you could have 3 people, dead or alive, for dinner guests, who would it be?
Frida Kahlo, 100%. I want her in a table eating with me. And 2 other people. Brené Brown is an amazing inspiration for me. So that would be amazing to have her over as well. And I love Natalia Lafourcade as well. So maybe I would invite her over too.
And what is a book that you have read recently or currently reading that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I'm actually reading a book right now that's called My Grandmother's Hands. And it's a beautiful book about trauma and how trauma can impact our body, especially based on your race. So depending on your race, we all have different trauma from our ancestors. So I would really recommend it. I'm still reading it, but it's been really interesting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vero. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Thank you so much. It's been awesome. A few next projects I'm working on immigration is good. We just launched our store for Modern Immigrant. So we have some merch available to promote positivity of immigration, and we're supporting immigrant causes. So you can check out modernimmigrant.net. In the website, you will find like all of the different projects we're working on, as well as our Instagram and also TikTok, if some people prefer TikTok. So yeah, that's a little bit about what's next. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure connecting with you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Same. I'm looking forward to hearing this. Thank you.